Hello and welcome to another Mobalytics video. I'm your host Virkayu, and in this one we shall be taking a look at the best early game champions in Season 10. That can always be a vague statement, but in this case we mean the champions that can snowball the hardest and get that early game lead, but the best champions that are also able to use that lead to get wins, because that's why we're here. So what we did is round up a whole bunch of data taken from Diamond and Plus where people actually start to get good at using leads, and the higher up the ladder you go into Master, Grandmaster, Challenger, the better players are at using those advantages to actually gain victories. That means if you are below these ranks, below Diamond, and you're thinking, well, how does this apply to me then? It means if you can actually become good at using these champions, gaining the lead and using it, you will have a much better time actually trying to climb. So the onus is on you to focus your ability on that champion, as well as understanding their win conditions. As always, these things can change with buffs and nerfs and meta game changes. However, usually these champions persist at being dominant snowballing picks. So let's start off with the mid lane, and for each role we will have two more obvious picks and then one curveball, which means not something that's naturally the best early game, but you can really win a lot of games if you get that lead. And I don't think we could make a video like this without starting with Katarina. For games that end before 20 minutes this season, she is approaching a 60% win rate, an almost obscene metric that I don't think any other champion can claim to be even close. And I've played a lot with Katarinas before. If you are the jungler, your best win condition is getting her fed and then roaming and destroying everything. Now, the first few levels can be rough. She is melee, you have to manage the waves, you have to understand your matchups a lot better, which is why as junglers I'm imploring you to please visit that lane. But before level 6, you can start to push, control, threaten kills, get resets. Once you start to get your itemization specs with your healing and your resets, you don't really need damage items though to do damage, so when you get them, you just end up overkilling everyone. And that's important. Some Katarinas play way too passively. Wait, I need Gunblade first. Wait, I need the Vampiric Scepter. Well, you actually have underrated damage when you hit level 6 without any core itemization. And one of the main differences between amazing Katarina players and bad ones is just this knowledge of damage output and when to actually use your spells for the all-in. They have that really shifty surprise factor, and the enemy team can never anticipate where exactly they use their CC. Overall, she has huge AoE damage, so you can basically take out more than one person, although everyone knows that, and has amazing mobility, so you can actually get in range to use your burst, to use your spells, and to tower dive bot laners for all time. Now, if you like tower diving, but you don't like walking and you prefer a more aerial approach, the next one we have here is Pantheon. You could almost understand it if Riot came out and said, our bad, he was meant to be a top laner, but he doesn't really actually do so well there. And that's true, because mid lane Pantheon has been a thing for quite a few months in Korea. They absolutely love the huge snowball potential he has, the global pressure he has at level 6, and at higher ranks it's very common to see him in mid lane as well as jungle, way more than you will ever see him top lane. And this is because he has the ability to stick near mages, block their spells, and actually counter burst them. If you're looking at old Pantheon and new Pantheon, not only does the new rework have thunderous thighs, I mean, really his skin tone is beautiful. His overall kit is even better than it used to be, with the added benefit of damage mitigation, which is the whole point, to use it against burst. And this is before we even talk about his ultimate. If you need to use those legs, you use them to hop and fly and dive lanes. He can roam anywhere. Top, bot, jungle, invading buffs, being in the middle of the map gives you control over everything. But most importantly, once he has a bit of an experience lead and then starts to get a little bit of that itemization, there's very little anyone can do until his win condition expires, which is why higher ranks are better at using it, as they don't really let that happen as much. Now, our curve pick here is Zoe. Might not seem like it, but she has one of the highest win rates in Season 10 early games. She has an underestimated amount of damage that she can put out early. That's because when you pull her Q back so far, you actually forget it was pulled back and then it smacks you in the face. But mostly because she can pick up those RNG summoners and hop around really easily. Her very strong auto attacks coupled with her ultimate can be very misleading for people to sort of anticipate and account for her damage. So if you manage to get any sort of lead, then basically for the rest of the game, the enemy team can't even play. You hit your sleeps, long range Qs, they get chunked and they have to reposition. And obviously anyone that steps out of position from your team and gets hit by a miles away bubble, you might think, well, let's go and turbo engage on her because she's a poke champion, but how? She's so far away, she has the safety of her team and her positioning, and if she's really fed, the damage will be lethal. Disney strikes again. Now for jungle, things change a little bit because the jungler's impact is really felt most heavily from the first minute up until around 15 minutes. Once the macro starts to take place and positions start to evolve and mix together, and it becomes less about pathing and sequencing and ganking. So while a lot of junglers do scale very well as a byproduct of their kits and the nature of the meta, there are some junglers like Nidalee who can really do whatever she wants in terms of invading and farming. Her farm speeds are so ultra quick that basically she can get level leads very quickly just by doing nothing. But because she has 6 abilities and she she can basically be ranged, well, she is ranged in a human form, that pressure on other melee junglers can be supreme and suffocating when the enemy jungler has no idea how to actually path in position. This works even better if the enemy Nidalee is very good at tracking and understands how to remove you from the game. As such, when you have a fed Nidalee who gets a little bit of a cleanup gank off first to his great pathing, removes the enemy jungler from the game, secures a herald and a dragon very easily, there's very little you can do about it for the next 20 minutes. Her spears and execute become disgusting. She also has utility to help other carries on her team that are fed, and basically thrives at winning games in that 25 to 30 minute mark or even sooner. As long as the pilot of the champion understands that pressure point and how to actually maximize the oppressive nature of her kit, she's one of the best snowballing junglers in the game, but one of the most difficult to actually learn. Now next up we have Elise and Rek'Sai. Both are very different. Elise is definitely a better overall pick, but they're the AP and AD version respectively. Elise and Rek'Sai both have dominant 3 camp clears into level 3 ganks. Elise is obviously better at the level 3 power spikes for tower dives if the wave is crashing, and Rek'Sai is better at using them at level 6 with her ultimate, both dodge target ability and allow them to get in and out very quickly, and while doing immense amounts of damage. In terms of late game playing, Nidalee is definitely much better than Rek'Sai and Elise because she offers more in terms of split push and utility, but Elise and Rek'Sai will have better utility in team fights in terms of repositioning and isolating targets. Essentially, all 3 are high elo picks because you need to understand maximum pressure, fast clear sequences, and really playing to win conditions of the early game. An early game jungler is much less forgiving than an early game laner because an early game laner can have a good roam and a good fight and then get fed. A jungler is unlikely to come back when they're really far behind if they don't actually have a scaling kit. Now in terms of best early game junglers and ones that really snowball pretty heavily, I want to throw Olaf out as a curveball, purely because you can afford to full clear, level 3 gank, invade, take scuttle, and if you get 2 to 3 kills in the first couple of minutes, you can run at anyone, you can run down anyone. The fact that your ultimate makes you immune to CC, no champion will get away from your Viking axes. And no, that's not because they look like they're only made of 2 pixels, but purely because the damage spike that he has for the early to mid is considered unnatural by Odin himself. You have stickiness with the axe resets when you use that properly. You have the ability to get out of CC situations. You have lifesteal to mislead people in close duels. As long as you get the lead, Olaf is one of the best champions at actually using it to solo objectives and just literally run to the Nexus. Yes, he was hit by the Conqueror nerfs just a little bit. Yes, he hasn't had the best time in terms of the grander meta, but in terms of early game spikes and snowballing, there are a few junglers that do it better than he does. Right now, when we talk about getting run down and chased down and destroyed, ADCs start to sweat, so let's head to that position. Overall, the role has been pulled away from early game dominance this season, with supports doing more of the work early, basically babysitting the ADCs, and then the ADCs will take over later, but that is not always the case. First up, we have Tristana. She is still designed to get a lead early and then snowball with it. Her whole kit really revolves around jumping in, something Kha'Zix players think that's what they're meant to do and then they get blown up and are useless. The key thing with Tristana is because of the ticking time bomb and the jump in ability that she has as an ADC, people just do not expect that amount of damage. Your jump gives you an extra stack of your explosive charge as well, again doing more damage, and then when it explodes you can use it again either to dive someone else or just overkill them. However, this is also her issue. She is a little one-dimensional. You jump in, you kill something, or you die. She's the assassin ADC Kha'Zix. Except Kha'Zix of course has other ways to evolve and reposition in fights and think a little bit. Tristana doesn't always have that, but as far as early game goes, she is built to get leads and use them. Now the League of Draven was not forgotten. At this point we're not really sure if it's Draven or the culture of alpha Draven ADC man. Go hard, go in, or don't play. It seems that when anyone actually plays Draven, they have to have the personification of the champion and really have that alpha mindset in the early game. Long considered a lane bully because of his unmatched early game damage. Whichever route you go, whether it's the Manamon Lethality or normal BTIE build, you will do DPS. He is also amazing at using that lead afterwards since he scales so well into the mid game. He's not a giga late game ADC, but he has a really strong mid game spike. Rapid fire cannon is so needed from just to pop people from far away. Now, you do need to get ahead. It's all very well talking about all the pros without any of the cons. If you int and run it down, those axes are gonna feel more like those plastic boomerangs you played with as a kid. If you do get fed and you don't int it down, nobody can trade blow for blow with you at all. Get a BF sword, hit twice and ult, and the enemy is probably dead. No other ADC can claim to have that much power. Now our curveball pick here is Jhin. With the way he scales with crit and hits like a truck, also he has that movement speed passive, you wouldn't really expect him to be here. But this season especially, he wins a lot before 20 to 25 minutes. And part of that is the scaling he has. So while he isn't the best early game champion, when you get a lead, you end up spiraling completely out of control. You just smack people from miles away with rapid fire cannon and then hit the big crits from your IE. Early game, you have a good setup with your support provided they understand how to play the lane. You have good damage with your 4th shot, which gives you positioning threat, and then eventually you do have your ultimate to use from ranges away. He might not naturally be designed like Crystal Draven to smash early, but he can actually get away with it for now. And again, that movement speed, so frustrating for melees. Okay, let's go from one side lane to another. Hello top laners, you actually have pretty good stats this year, both top lane and bottom lane getting some love from Riot in terms of buffs and quality of life changes, and we must start off with the absolute classic top lane bully Renekton. Now I put a lot of conditions on some of the champions in this video saying, well, you have to play it well, you have to do this and that. In Renekton, he really stomps the early game. As long as you understand his trading power and basically how to mislead the enemy or punish their mispositioning, you can pretty much get fed in most games. He has one of the highest win rates in the early game, but also has one of the biggest drop-offs in the game. That means if you don't know how to close out, you will lose. When you talk about a pure lane bully, he cannot really be matched. Damage, heal, tanky-ish, or tanky with his ultimate, can dive supremely well with your jungler, 1v2s are possible, and is very losing matchups in those early phases, unless of course they just chill and outscale. But usually if that's the case, then your jungler didn't really understand the lane matchups. Junglers, learn lane matchups, it really helps you. Although Renekton really didn't use or punish those mistakes as he should have. Just be the crocodile, don't be the belt. And now we really must talk about Kled, because Kled is a little bit unnatural when he gets leads. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Smurf Kleds or really good Kleds play lane. Once they get that lead, you just look at him and you die. He is stupidly good at getting that lead and using it. Remember junglers, again, a nice, easy to use CC for the Kled means that if you have CC of your own, it is basically a guaranteed flash and a guaranteed kill in that lane. Use it, abuse it, get Kled fed today, because when played properly, he has more of a health bar because of the mount. Skull may run away every now and then, but it basically gives him this whole full extra health bar system that allows him to dodge aggro, have different abilities, and play and trade effectively. Disgusting damage, great dueling power, and then the biggest thing about this champion that most other laners don't have is that his ultimate can take him into other lanes. Now top laners, other lanes are the things on the map that you don't look at but exist otherwise. Yes, I'm calling you out. If you get a lead in the top lane and you don't use it on the map for either a TP play, a roam play, or anything like that, don't complain when you lose. And on that note, Kled really makes it easy for you. Go back to base, just ult bottom lane. Why not? Kill them. It's easy. You have a lead, do it mid lane, run down the river and contest with the Herald. You just run at people, great engage for your team. So once you have that early game lead, the mid game fights are dictated by you. Honestly, you could even put Kled above Renekton. Now our curveball here is Shen because, well, have you seen that damage? Have you seen his ultimate utility? Best win rate in the early game of the season. Much more effective before laning ends. And this is because he can really abuse the positioning of his ultimate and having TP. He really isn't just about the scale and split push anymore. He does more damage, and by good damage we mean base damage, which means he can actually punish lanes, and then use that lead for TPs and flash taunts. Now with Titanic Hydra, he actually really does snowball and kill people if he gets a lead, as well as the fact that he becomes unholy tanky. He has huge impact on other lanes, and he can swing early game leads in his favor. When you have high base damage, when you have a CC spell, a shield for your ADC when they inevitably miss position, and you have that macro advantage, really you can dictate the tempo of the game and really change the nature of fights that most likely aren't going in your team's favor. Really, ladies and gentlemen, Shen is in a good spot. And finally we flick to the other side lane again, and we have to deal with support, or otherwise known as the second jungler to mid laners. First off, we have Karma, a huge priority at higher ranks because of her insanely dominant early game. We used insanely and dominant a lot this video, but that's what all these champions have in common. ADCs really struggle to farm or do anything against her, so she ends up giving her AD a free lane. The zoning power, the shield, the stun, the disengage if the jungler shows up, it's really about denying the enemy as well as enabling freezes. That poke I mentioned has a lot of damage, and she has the shield necessary to protect everyone from their silliness. And then again, that stun I talked about, that tether, if your jungler does decide, hey, you know what, actually I will gank bottom lane this game, well, you've got the CC to enable it. And she can use this lead to then move around the map and protect her entire team. But by the time you're doing that, your ADC has double the CS, 2 kills, and your jungler has 2 dragons. So using Karma's positioning perfectly in lane to get your ADC fed to the point that they can carry is exactly what you're looking to do. Another champion like that, you might have heard of him, Thresh. He's getting a beautiful new skin that shows him his human form, and boy oh boy, that hook. Do I need to say more? Can I just say hook and everyone knows what I mean? Long range, hitbox double the size of the lane, lets him pull himself towards you so he can flare you and then ult you. Basically, if it hits, you will never move again. At least it doesn't feel like you will move again. He sets up so many kills. He protects so many ADCs with that lantern. He roams and sets up even more kills for the map. This is the ultimate original overloaded kit, and he still exists, and he's still in the support, And yes, he can feel tankier than he is, he's not actually that tanky, but his CC and kit is so dynamic and fun. It's why so many support mains love to play it, because it not only protects your team, helps engage, you are basically the king of chain CC into engage. I can tell you as a jungler, there's nothing more beautiful than going for a gank. The Thresh hits a hook, goes in following it, lanterns you in the same time, flays them into your CC, and they die. Everyone on a team with a good Thresh is happier, 100% confirmed by science. And now for our curve support, Set. Used to be a lot better in the top lane if I remember, but he was basically nerfed out of that contention. He still can do it, but his support is really strong at the moment. Specifically, he's even been using runes like Omnistone. And while he's used a lot at higher ranks, the issue is that he's really bad when he's behind or much later in the game, so he's risky to play. But obviously, if he's risky, then there's upside or no one would play it. And that's his early game, because it's so good with his engage and his damage. That W is so misleading to bottom laners. And remember that W hit spot does true damage, and against slower champions that won't have the mobility in the early game to get out of that, they're more likely to be hit by it. So when you combine his flash and hex flash with that E, you have the Q as well to run at people's faces and then punch it. You have the W as a safety net as well as damage. It almost feels weird, but it's so sudden onto the enemy bottom lane. Flash in, stun, get a kill, repeat. And as I said, you have hex flash and Nimbus Cloak, so repeat is very much a literal thing. And every time you use it, you've got that burst of movement speed along with your Q that allows you to get onto targets. But don't forget, huge damage, big shield, tanky itemization, disgusting peel, and that ultimate is an absolute game changer for all fights. The worst thing for me as a Volibear main is when I ult in and engage on teams, Set says no, and then just ults me back into my own team. It disengages me entirely. And you can do that with whatever team combo you have. Whether you need to be the engage, whether you need to flash ult them into your team, whether you need to be a peel bot, whatever you need from that support set with that ultimate, it can be done, and you will also increase your fitness levels by doing setups all game. Well, there you have it, the best early game / snowball champions for you to use in Season 10 at the moment, and hopefully for the rest of the season, right? Usually is a bit slower with their changes at this point onward, which means a lot of these champions, if you can become very good at them, understand the win conditions, get leads, and close games out, you should be able to find a lot of LP on the way to your ranked goals for the end of the year. Thank you very much for watching. Please consider sharing, liking, and commenting if you did enjoy and learn something. I've been your host, Virkayu, and as always, I will see you all in the next video.